Margaret Hayes had been cleaning rooms at the Riverside Manor for 30 years. At 58, she knew every creaking floorboard, every stubborn window latch, every shadow that danced across the vintage wallpaper when the afternoon sun filtered through lace curtains. She was a woman of quiet dignity. With soft blonde hair she still wore pinned up beneath her uniform cap, and kind blue eyes that had seen both joy and sorrow. Her husband had passed 5 years ago, and her daughter lived 3 states away with grandchildren Margaret only saw on holidays. The manor had become her refuge, her purpose. That Tuesday evening, Margaret prepared her cart for the final round of turn-down service. Room 7 was last on her list. A new guest had checked in that afternoon, a young man named Daniel Crawford. The front desk had mentioned he seemed unwell, perhaps the flu, and had asked not to be disturbed. But it was Margaret's job to ensure fresh towels and turn-down beds. She knocked gently. Once. Twice. Silence. She used her key and pushed the door open slowly. Housekeeping. She called softly into the dim room. What she saw made her heart leap. A man lay motionless on the bed, his shirt unbuttoned and stained dark with what could only be blood. His face was pale, almost gray, and his dark hair was damp with sweat. Tattoos covered his chest and arms, intricate designs that told stories she couldn't read. Margaret's first instinct wasn't fear. It was the same instinct that had made her bandage her daughter's scraped knees and sit vigil through her husband's final illness. Someone needed help. She moved closer, her practiced eye assessing the wound along his ribcage. Deep, but the bleeding had slowed. He was breathing, shallow but steady. "Young man," she said gently, touching his forehead, "burning with fever. Can you hear me?" His eyes flickered open, dark and unfocused. "Don't call anyone," he managed, his voice rough. "Please." Margaret had lived long enough to know that sometimes people ran from things. Sometimes those things were their own demons. Sometimes they were real dangers. She looked at this stranger, this wounded soul, and made a choice that had nothing to do with logic. "I won't call anyone just yet," she said calmly. "But this wound needs tending. Stay still." She worked efficiently, drawing on memories of caring for her husband, of practical nursing skills learned through necessity rather than training. She fetched clean towels, warm water, the first aid supplies kept in the housekeeping closet. She cleaned the wound with gentle hands, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped it carefully. Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mumbling words she couldn't quite catch. Names, perhaps. Apologies. Once she thought she heard him say, "Mother." Margaret sat in the upholstered chair beside the bed and simply kept watch. Outside, the evening deepened into night. The lamp cast a warm, golden glow that reminded her of reading bedtime stories long ago. Around midnight, his fever broke. His eyes opened, clearer now, and focused on her face. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "You don't know who I am." Margaret folded her hands in her lap. "No, I don't, but I know you're hurt. I know you're alone. That's enough for me to know." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper, like a man remembering what kindness looked like. "I'm not a good person," he said quietly. "People fear me." "They should." "Perhaps," Margaret replied. "But tonight, you're just someone who needs help. Tomorrow can worry about itself." She learned over the next 3 days, as she secretly brought him food and changed his bandages, that Daniel Crawford was indeed feared. He ran an organization that operated in shadows, that dealt in things she'd only heard about in movies. He was, by most definitions, dangerous. But she also learned that he'd been orphaned at 15, that he'd clawed his way up from nothing, that he'd made choices he couldn't undo, built walls he didn't know how to dismantle. "My mother used to hum while she cooked," he told her one evening, as Margaret arranged pillows behind his back. "You remind me of her." "The way you move, like everything deserves care," Margaret smiled softly. "Everything does deserve care, even wounded strangers." On the 4th day, Daniel could stand. His color had returned, his strength rebuilding. He looked at Margaret with something like reverence. "I can never repay this," he said. "I don't want repayment," Margaret replied. "I want you to think about the person you want to be. The person your mother might have hoped you'd become. She saw his jaw tighten, his eyes glisten. It's too late for that. It's never too late for kindness, she said gently. Even small acts, even quiet ones, they ripple outward in ways we never see. Daniel left that evening moving carefully, his wound healing but still tender. He pressed an envelope into Margaret's hand. She opened it later to find more money than she'd see in a year and a note in careful handwriting. For the grandchildren. From someone trying to be better. 3 months passed. Margaret heard nothing more and expected nothing. She'd done what her heart required, and that was enough. Then one morning she arrived at work to find an envelope at the front desk addressed to her. Inside was a photograph. Daniel standing beside an older woman in a community center, both holding paintbrushes, surrounded by children's artwork. On the back he'd written, "Teaching art to kids who need a safe place. Small acts. Thank you for reminding me." Margaret tucked the photograph into her uniform pocket near her heart. She thought about the strange ways grace works in the world, how sometimes kindness plants seeds we never see bloom, but they bloom all the same, in their own time, in their own way. That evening, as she prepared her housekeeping cart, Margaret hummed softly to herself. The same tune her own mother had hummed years ago, the same tune that carried love forward, generation to generation, stranger to stranger, wound to healing. And somewhere across the city, in a room filled with children's laughter, a man who'd once dealt in darkness now painted pictures of light. All because someone chose kindness when fear would have been easier. All because mercy, like grace, asks nothing of us except that we offer it freely, and that makes all the difference.